folks for taking the time this afternoon to spend with a really topic that's near and dear to our hearts here at Breakwater. We spent the year focusing on a range of different areas, right? Whether it was health and wellness to estate planning, and then your standard fare on markets and the economy. But we have an extra special event today. As I think about being a father of two young boys, and Tom with three himself, this is near and dear just in terms of how we think about our own financial planning. And I know as we have more and more conversation with both parents, prospective parents, grandparents, that it's a key area of focus for financial health and wellness. So again, today we're going to introduce a couple of guests in just a moment. Tom, who was the most recent partner at the firm, who joined us back in July. He's a certified financial planner, had that designation since 2005, but he's also a college funding and student loan advisor, right? A designation that's a pretty important one. It's not well known in the industry, shame on us, but I know, again, for a lot of younger people, this thing keeps them up more at night than what's going on with retirement, because there's a lot longer runway. So Tom will be kind of the host of the discussion today. We're all excited to have Tom take us through some key points. But let me spend just an extra moment talking about our esteemed guests here. So Lauren Watson is a 2000 graduate of Boston College. So she can understand the cost of higher academia today. I think Boston College is one of the most expensive schools out there, probably about $85,000 a year. Lauren has spent 20 plus years in the field of college counseling and admissions. She worked at some of the most prestigious preparatory schools in New England before, in 2021, starting her own firm. The work that she does with her clients is from narrowing down appropriate schools to coaching and essay writing. So she's going to have a lot to add to the conversation. So Lauren, thanks for joining us again. Really happy to have you. Claire Beslow, I've known for like 15 years or so. There's both a personal connection and a professional one. Her probably most impressive feat is being the mother of three boys, and all very, very successful. But she's an institution in northern New Jersey as part of the Ramsey School District, where she retired just last year. She's helped students for the better part of 35 years navigate that whole process. And so she's going to bring some real institutional knowledge to the discussion today. So both Lauren and Claire continue to work with clients on a direct basis. If there's a opportunity for us to connect you with them after the discussion, we're happy to share contact information. Again, we're grateful for the time today. We really do look at this to be an important conversation. Just some housekeeping, again, we're going to go through both Lauren and Claire giving us some tips and tricks really to navigate the process. Tom's also going to spend some time on kind of the numbers. We're going to open up to Q&A. I know some people are very comfortable in a Q&A setting, asking all sorts of questions. Others might feel a little uncomfortable, so feel free to send us one-off questions. We'll close out at the end with probably just soliciting some feedback, and then we'll tee up our calendar for October, as we've got a couple of important things to announce. But again, without further ado, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you and let us, lead us through what's a really exciting afternoon here on September 28th.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time. I feel like you covered it well. We're going to start with Lauren Watson, again, owner of Watson College Consulting. So Lauren, I will turn it to you.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to spend the next 12 to 15 minutes talking to you about three things. First, I'm going to help you come to understand what exactly is a college counselor. I'm then going to try to provide an answer to what is the most commonly asked question that I encounter in my work. And then I'm going to provide you some general guidance or advice on engaging in the college process with your child. So first up, what is a college counselor anyway? As a product of public high school myself, I didn't know what a college counselor was until I found myself working as an admission officer at Boston College as a young professional. So a college counselor is someone who is an expert in college admission, and they gain that expertise usually in one of two ways. They either have the experience of working, as I do, and many of us do, as an admission officer in a selective college or university setting, and or they have worked in a school setting as either a guidance counselor like Claire has, or as a college counselor in a private school setting, which was my path. When I worked at Boston College, I was very surprised to learn that my students who were coming through the applicant pool from private high schools had someone in the building as a part of the faculty at their school whose entire job it was to guide them through the college application process. And college counselors can be expected to help a family and a student navigate the many layers of this process, right? Everything from designing a testing schedule to selecting colleges to consider, to learning how to research those colleges. And then of course, everything in between and then it gets to the work of actually applying and supporting a student as they complete applications, coaching them on their essay writing, perhaps helping them prepare for interviews if those are relevant to that student's process, and then making enrollment decisions. So ultimately, a college counselor is someone who should serve as a guide and a coach to your high school student and your family. And so you might be thinking, won't my school's guidance counselor provide this support? And my answer is the phrase I use most in my work, which is, it depends. The answer is yes and no. It depends on your school. It depends on the resources available at that school. It depends on the size of that high school. It depends on the training that has been granted to those guidance counselors. And it depends on your child's ability to advocate for themselves within the context of their high school. To be very clear, I stand in praise and admiration of guidance counselors everywhere right now, particularly in this sort of post-COVID environment. Guidance counselors are holding together our high school students' lives from a social emotional standpoint in ways that college counselors don't have to. And what I mean by that is that guidance counselors are trained to be excellent generalists in the high school experience, and college counselors are narrow experts on the college admission process. So they're two different roles. Tom, can you advance us, please? So what's the value of working with a college counselor? I work really hard in my role with families to not contribute to the panic and the stress that already exists for a lot of families in the college application process. But it would be a mistake to not acknowledge that the admissions landscape is shifting. It's constantly changing. And especially now, we are living at a point in history in this country where education is changing pretty dramatically. And some examples of that might be that in the wake of COVID, we live in a test optional landscape where the value of an SAT or an ACT test has changed dramatically in the way that it is used as an evaluative tool in an application process. Barriers to college application processes have been removed, which, to be clear, I believe is a very good thing, but it also means that the volume of applications that colleges are seeing is increasing. The volume of applications that students are submitting is increasing. So the process itself is very different from what it was for myself, for many, many parents all across the country when we did it maybe 20 or 30 years ago. The most important value, I think, in hiring an independent college counselor is that it can really work well to protect and preserve your relationship with your child. In my many years of doing this, I have seen really well-intentioned parents and adults make mistakes. We all make mistakes as parents, but when it's in the context of your student's senior year of high school and in the context of working through the college application process, those fractures can really be damaging at a point in time when you really want to foster and protect your bond that you have with your teenager. So hiring a third party to absorb some of that angst and provide guidance through what is an emotional and sometimes stressful process can really be very, very valuable. So I view myself as a companion to kids as they walk through what is really their first big adult decision. The most common question I am asked as I'm out in the world, maybe on a soccer sideline with one of my 3 sons, and people find out what I do, they all ask the same first question. When do we begin? when should I start talking to my kid about the college application process? And before I give you these approachable first steps that you might want to try with your student, I want to provide a framework through which to view this process. And that is to remind you of the days when your child was a baby or a toddler, and there were developmental milestones that each of those children were expected to hit, right? We all remember taking our babies to the pediatrician to see if they were scooting or if they were cooing, or if they were sitting up, and eventually when they're walking and talking. And in that context, there is no expectation that every baby on the block is going to sit up on the same day or move through those milestones at the same pace and at the same time. When it comes to the college process, I would offer that it can be helpful to consider it as a developmental milestone for your teenager. And that can help you realize and remember that not every teenager is going to be ready to engage with this process in the same way at the same time. And so when people ask me, when should I begin with my student? I suggest these different exercises to check signals with your child to see how receptive they might be to talking about their life after high school. The first thing I would offer that's very easy, with the holidays coming up, you might want to try this. It can be really helpful to very casually visit college campuses. If you have college campuses in your local area, or if you're going on a trip, as I mentioned, for the holidays, it might look like saying to your teenager, hey, in November, we're going to drive to Uncle Jimmy's house, Aunt Susie's house, whoever. You're going to drive to somebody's house. And I noticed that on the way to their home, we're going to drive by these 3 colleges. Why don't you pick one that you'd like us to take a walk through on our way? That example provides your child a sense of agency in choosing which of the schools they want to look at. And please notice I did not say that you scheduled a tour or that your student's going to talk with an admission officer. This is a very low-key exercise. You might not even get out of the car, but planting your student physically on a college campus can really help them start to imagine what college life will look and feel like for them. And when they're young in high school, 9th and 10th grade, doing this in a casual way whenever you go on a trip or when you have some spare time can really help them start to build a frame of reference for what college might look like. The second thing I want to suggest is to discuss your family's values around attending college. If you are lucky enough to live in a community where it is a foregone conclusion or an assumption that your child is college bound, you're very, very lucky. And that provides an opportunity to infuse some intentionality into the conversations you might have with your child about going to college. As an aside, I will mention a dear friend and colleague of mine always says, the best places to talk to a teenager are car rides and campfires. So if you're having trouble getting your teenager to engage with you, do it in an environment where they don't necessarily have to stare you right in the eyes, right? Take them for a walk, go on a hike, walk the dog, have a fire pit in your backyard. But if you give them something else to focus on while you talk, you might make more progress. As a mom of 3 tween boys, I live that in my life all the time. So you might want to have a conversation with your child about why you expect or hope that they will go to college. You might talk with them about what you loved about your own college experience if you have one. It might be really productive for you to ask your child, even at a young age, why do you think people go to college? What do you hope to get out of a college experience? But if you're able to identify those values and set some goals for why it is you might embark on this complicated, long-winding process of applying to college, it will help you stay anchored as a family, and your child's ability to talk about it will give you as a parent some sense of how ready they might be to start digging into some more nuts and bolts of starting the process. The third thing I'd offer is a game I like to call Passing Notes in the FIS Guide. The FIS Guide is really a Bible in college counseling. It is the gold standard for research, and I actually have it right here on my desk. Of course, it looks like this. Comes out every year. You can grab it on Amazon. I would suggest that you pick up a copy and assign each party, parents and students, a sticky note color. So you might be green, your child might be blue. You leave the FIS Guide on the kitchen table or some central place in your home. And as you pass by, you each pick up the book and you identify and flag with your sticky note a school that you think might be interesting for your child to consider, and your child gets to then identify schools that are interesting to them. The fun of the game is that the student has veto power. The student can write on your sticky note as a parent that they don't want to consider a school, but they have to give you a reason. So the note might say, "Thanks, Mom, I'm really not interested in being in the Midwest." Or, "Dad, I read about this school. I really like the core curriculum. Can you help me find schools that have more like this?" You're passing notes back and forth. It's a very low-key, long-term experience where you each are starting to gain a deeper understanding of what you're hoping the college experience will look like for this child. And at the end of it, you've essentially started to build a list of schools that your student can consider when they're ready to actually build that list. Finally, you want to encourage your child to engage with their academic interests, their extracurriculars, and with teachers in the wider community. The best way to build a successful college application is to have an authentic and genuine high school experience. When families come to me, sometimes they're surprised when I say to them that I don't begin working in earnest with students until they're at the beginning of their 11th grade year. And that is because I believe strongly that students shouldn't be asked to imagine their life after high school until they've sort of reached the halfway point of their high school career, which is the beginning of 11th grade. So leading up to that point, if a student has been encouraged to engage with their work in the classroom, with their life outside of the classroom, and with their teachers, and with the work that they're doing outside of their school, they will be well positioned to start thinking a little bit more intentionally about the college process as a junior. Finally, I'm going to leave you with my best advice as you think about starting this process. The first is to leave room for evolution with your teenager. So many students and parents come to me early on in their high school career, and we have these preliminary conversations. Inevitably, parents say to me, "I just can't imagine that my student will be able to navigate this complicated and long process of applying to college on their own." And I say to them, you have to leave room for the incredible amount of growth that happens between a student's 9th and 10th grade years and the beginning of their senior year. You've got to leave room for the growth, because even though the landscape of college admission has shifted to a place where it is creeping earlier and earlier into the high school experience, the students are not they're not maturing at a faster rate. So just because colleges might be inviting students to apply earlier into their senior year, it doesn't necessarily mean that your student is ready to do so. So you've got to leave room for your student to evolve at the rate that they feel comfortable. I also want to urge you to control what you can control. There's going to be a lot about this process that is out of your hands and out of your students' hands. But there are things that you can sort of get your arms around that will positively impact your child's experience. For example, you can control the way that you respond as their parent to the stress that is going to come your way. You can control how much this process oozes into your family life. You can control how many schools you go to visit with your child. And you can control the conversations around this college process to be anchored in your values and to be anchored in the deep care that you have for your child and their outcomes. Remember that your child is looking for you to be a steady presence. As parents, our students are always, or our children are always looking to us to stay calm and be the indicator for whether or not they should be concerned. And as you move through this process, try your best to be the person who is reassuring them that no matter the outcomes, that no matter what happens, they're valued, they're wonderful young adults, and that this process is not, in fact, going to be the end-all be-all to their lives, that they are, in fact, valuable young adults. Finally, look for the joy. There's a lot of joy and humor and fun to be had in this process. Your child gets to go to college. How lucky are they? How lucky are you as a family that you get to embark on this incredible adventure where your kid gets to learn about who they are and what they want for themselves, and you get to bear witness to that as their parent. So keep an eye out for the joy. It doesn't all have to be stress and panic. It can be an incredible privilege and a really wonderful bonding experience between you and your child. Thanks very much. I'm going to pass it over to Claire.
Thank you, Lauren. That's great. I appreciate it. I took a lot of notes. I took a lot of things away from it, as I always do when I speak to either you or Claire or both. There's always great nuggets in there, and look for the joy is probably a good way to live your life. So I think that's a really good one. Thank you for that. I will turn it over to Claire. Let me flip to your slide. I'm sorry, my trigger finger's a little happy today, but here you go.
No problem. Thank you, Lauren. And it is about the joy and it is about reducing the stress. The part that I'm getting to is where stress gets stressful. So I will typically start a meeting of any kind with take a deep breath, relax. We're going to do this and we're going to enjoy it because I think it's very, very important. It's a bonding process. One thing I want to know is the college selection process, which is what we're talking about, what my portion is about, is really something between you, your children, your school counselor, your private counselor, the admission staff. It is not a singular insular process. So we're looking first at the factors that the students should consider. And here I really mean students and parents. These are not in any particular order. Where the next slide, they are in a more particular order. It's all dependent upon what is important to you and what is important to your kids. So the first 5, the location, number of kids on campus, particular majors, activities that the schools have, and student life, those will be the primary ones that kids are interested in. The cost will be the primary one that you are interested in. And so they all kind of have to be worked together. I'm just going to start with cost for a minute because I'm there. There is something called a net price calculator. Since this is a financial talk, net price calculator can be found on every college website. The easiest way to find it is to put in a search bar net price calculator because it's not always in the same place on different websites. And that should give you an approximation of what this school would cost for you. They are not the same on every website because different schools weigh different things differently. So you do need to do it every time. Okay, back to the top, what the students should consider. I'm very, very much with Lauren on not getting into the process too deeply until I would say the summer after your sophomore year, the very beginning of junior year. Do the casual visits before, but the single most important thing you can actually do later is to step on campus with your kids. I found for my boys, that was a very big bonding thing. It was done differently with all 3 of them for different reasons. But that said, the licorice we ate in the car, the M&M peanuts we had when we stayed in the hotel rooms, we still talk about today, when they are parents. So that's kind of fun. We look at the location. Location can be thought of in many factors. Location could be near or far from where you live. Location could be city, suburban, or urban. Don't, when you see the study guides, they will list things as suburban or urban. Try not to get too hung up on those terms. See whether the schools have a campus, whether they are in the city, whatever. Many kids will think that they want something. And then when they step on the campus, they understand, oh, that's what that means. I have any number of students who care about what the buildings look like. If they care about what the buildings look like, that's important to them. If they don't care, that's fine. But it's not going to be the same for any 2 kids. And it may not, believe it or not, be the same for your child at a different school. Get to that and continue down. Number of students on campus doesn't really have as much to do, I don't think, with the number of kids as it does with the size of the campus. You can have a small school of 1,600 kids that has acres and acres. You may have a school that is much larger. I went to Syracuse. Syracuse has a lot of kids on campus. It's not that large a campus. It's a very walkable campus. So I think you have to look at both of those. Academic major matters where it matters. If you have a child who you know wants to be a nurse, wants to be an architect, wants to be an engineer, wants to study accounting, it's very, very important that those schools have those programs. But if you are not applying for a specific program, then you want them to have majors that are of interest, but there are even schools where you can create a major. So once again, these are factors your students should consider, but most kids don't know what they want to major in, or if they think they know what they want to major in, they may change it. We hold on to that one. Activities. This one, I think, is more important than kids realize. One big one in the school I used to work in was marching band. And I would have students where marching band was their life. Well, they fell in love with the school. It didn't have a marching band. Are you sure? Marching band was where you made your friends. It was where you hung. Or are you sure? Oh, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I do not want to tell you how many times that marching band had not having marching band caused a child to transfer from the school. They need to kind of listen to themselves and look at who they are. We as counselors are guides. We can only present what we think might or might not be an issue, but then it is very, very much up to you and the kids to say, yes, this is important, not important. Student life, I narrow that down very much to on-campus presence, off-campus presence. If you're going to commute to a school, you do want it to be a school where there are a lot of commuters. If you want to live on campus, you want there to be a lot of kids living on campus. One thing to be careful about when you're reading the guides with regard to that, living on campus doesn't necessarily mean living in student housing. Very, very often, off-campus housing is right across the street from the school, and a lot of kids may move off campus sophomore year, but truly not be commuters. They're just living in the surrounding areas. Okay, that is a very brief overview of this one. Happy to take questions later. Lauren and I had said at the beginning, we typically do these as 1 hour or 2 hour presentations, and so squeezing it all into 15 minutes is a challenge. So, Tom, can we just flip to what the colleges are considering? Okay, the factors that colleges will consider, GPA, these are in order in the sense that GPA is number one. You cannot hide from a bad GPA. There are sections on the application where you can explain grades that might not be what you think they are. But this is the first and foremost thing the schools are looking at. Standardized test results, sometimes. That used to be GPA, standardized tests, depending upon the school. How did that play out? Today, which Lauren alluded to, with the optional, other than Florida state schools, the optional submission of tests, that becomes a strategy. And that is one that your counselor helps you with. Do we submit these scores? Do we not submit these scores? You may submit a 1350, which is a very nice score. You may submit that to some schools, but there are other schools you would never submit that to. And that has become a challenge, something to think about. Strength of your academic program. The smaller the school, the more they will care about the strength of your academic program. The larger the school, the more they will simply care about the GPA. I mean, I'm not going to go into it now, but there's something called a recalculation of GPA that is really getting into the weeds, but that's where all of that stuff gets a little bit murky. Factors colleges will consider with regard to activities. Okay, there are people who may disagree with me, but this is why important to me. If you're going to play football at the school, take care that you're a football player. If you're going to play soccer at the school, they care that you're a soccer player. Otherwise, they care that you do whatever activities are important to you. This is a let a child be themselves. Let them find out who they are. If they want to do poetry, let them be poets. If they want to sing, let them sing. If they want to be athletes, let them be athletes. Schools want you for who you are. Recommendations. I would encourage your children to get to know their teachers and to get to know their school counselor. The school counselor will write a recommendation for every college they apply to, and teachers will write the recommendations for every school they apply to, but some schools will read them, some schools will not read them. The value of the recommendations depends upon pretty much the size of the school and how competitive the school is. And that is one, a story unto itself. Essays. The Common Application has a standard essay that everyone simply writes. We as counselors, and we both are English majors, so we both work very closely with our kids on the essays. Just make sure they answer the question. As long as they answer the question and it's about them, like where is the you in your essay, most important. All of the colleges want you to have someone proof the essay. No one wants to read a poorly written essay. They don't give it that much time. And so it needs to be as well done as possible. Optional essays, I always recommend the kids do optional essays. Then there are something called supplemental essays. Once again, getting into the weeds. But if you have kids who are ready to be applying soon, they want to see how many supplemental essays they may be doing in addition to their regular essays, because it's all about not driving yourself crazy. And once again, I'm trying to take the stress out of it just to let you know these are all the things you're going to be doing. There's one other thing, your interest in attending. Sometimes some schools do something which is called tracking interest. Tracking interest means if you visit the school, you get a little check, so to speak. If you do an interview, if they offer them, you get a check. If you do an alumni interview, you get a check. If you have sent emails directly to the admissions counselor at the school, you get a little check. If you want to find out if a particular school does it, just call. And when you call, you say, hi, do you track interest or do you not track interest? It doesn't have to be, more or less than that. You don't have to give your name. People who are answering the phone when you call the schools are typically students who this is part of their work study or a job that they have. They can answer a lot for you. That will not be tracked. You can find, or I won't go into it. There is so much more, but I just saw the time. Those are the factors. They'll consider these factors. You'll consider, if you have any questions, ask them later. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll send you to Tom.
Thank you, Claire, very much. Also very informative. I really appreciate it. It's so funny you mentioned the aesthetic of the buildings and the schools. I recently was just taking my kids who were still little around to different schools, and the first thing that came out of my 10-year-old's mouth was, I don't like that all the buildings are made of brick at the school. And so, she's an aesthetic kid, she's an artsy kid, but I never even thought of it. We're driving around through this campus, and that was the first thing she said. So that really resonated with me as you said that. And I would imagine if you're going to spend 4 years at a location, a place, you want to have it be appealing to you. You want to walk around and be like, yeah, this is campus. This is what I imagined college to look like. So that's great. And there's definitely a lot more to dive into there, but that struck me as just kind of a funny little thing. So on to the economics of college. So I'm going to cover 3 different areas. First, saving for college. Next, I would really term it surviving the college years financially, and then paying off student loans. Jeff mentioned at the top of the conversation, I went and got an additional certification specifically as it relates to college funding and student loans and things like that, because I just think it's such a big decision in people's life. It's often one of the largest financial decisions that people make, and sometimes they do it without any help. So they're filling out forms, they're taking loans, and they don't necessarily know what it all means. And a big part of what we do at Breakwater Capital Group, right? It's broad financial planning. It's the big picture, but this is a critical aspect for so many people, so many families, and that's really where I want to spend my time today. So, as far as saving for college goes, where and how to save. The 529, from my perspective, still is the number one place to save for college. Some people will supplement that. They'll look at a dual purpose Roth IRA. So they'll contribute to the Roth. If they need that money, they could always use it, but it can go to retirement if they don't end up needing it. There are also many state programs where you can prepay tuition if you think your kids are going to go through state schools, and you're looking for that kind of in-state discount. That absolutely is the case in Massachusetts. I know New Jersey is the same, and I believe Colorado also has programs that are focused on that. Something that we want to pay attention to is not just the tuition price, and Claire mentioned it with the calculators on many college websites, but like what is the actual total cost of attendance? And I do have a visual for this, but it's not just tuition. It's room, it's board, it's travel, it's personal expenses, it's books. There's a lot that goes into it. And how do we look at it really big picture holistically to say, okay, for year one, what is it? Year two, year three, and four, and maybe five for some kids. We'll look at some in-state and out-of-state, like what's really the difference, and ultimately, planning out how to use debt potentially to your advantage. So taking student loans and what are some strategies around that. So first, we have very advanced planning software, where we can look at clients, and I don't expect you to read any of these charts, by the way, so don't squint and get really close to your screen. But the idea that we can get a summary of, when do you start saving? How much are you saving? How frequently are you saving? And what's it going to take for you to reach that goal? So families have all different feelings about how to help their kids best pay for college. Do they pay for it all? Do they have their children participate to some extent, meaning, give them a little stake in the game? So they're paying some of the tuition and they see maybe the value of going to class a little bit more regularly. Versus, the child being more independent and going out, finding the college, and figuring out how to finance it along the way. Whatever the approach is, whatever that number is that we're trying to hit, and we can help with, discovering what those numbers really are. We have software, and we have exercises to go through to kind of be in line with Lauren and Claire's process to actually get into these schools. I would say on our end, we start as early as humanly possible. So, if, 1 month after a baby boy or baby girl is born, we want to have, savings accounts in place and 529s opened, and, any congratulations checks, we know exactly where they're going to go. They're going to get invested, and we're going to have the maximum amount of time to save for college tuition. I mentioned cost of attendance, and as I said, just breaking down tuition, room, board, books, fees, personal expenses. People often underestimate this because, again, they look at kind of like the headline price and say, okay, like tuition is $36,000. If you look at this list, total cost of attendance is $56,000. So there's an extra $20,000 in there that we need to consider. Often, as you go through the process, as you get admitted, like you may get, a merit scholarship or a grant of some kind, or, there could be other things that would help lower that total cost of attendance. And we can figure that in too. So we have the ability to take real world, offer letters and be able to plug in numbers and figure out exactly what the cost is going to be. Next slide, and this is just interest of time. I'm going to go kind of quickly, and it is a little bit of an eye chart, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I did want to look at just in-state versus out-of-state, and need met, right? That varies by school, gift aid, and even graduation rates, right? Like, so some schools you'll have, if you look at down at the bottom, Boston College, that's where I went undergrad, 89% of kids finish in 4 years. If you look at the top line, University of Massachusetts, 58% graduate in 4 years, right? So when you start thinking of cost of attendance and number of years you're going to be paying for college, that's an important statistic for some people to look at it and go, okay, like, 4 years, we're getting in, we're getting out, like we're going to get the full benefit of the education, but that can add to the bottom line as far as what the expense actually is. Excuse me. If you look at in-state versus out-of-state, to use Rutgers, which is kind of the middle of the chart there, cost of attendance, $56,310 is the out-of-state total cost of attendance. In-state is about $38,000. Okay, so it's a lot less if you're in-state, a lot more if you're out-of-state. And again, those are all things to consider as you're applying to schools, looking at schools, and trying to figure out, again, what is that total cost that you're going to end up paying? As we look at acceptance and projected debt, right? So as we look at schools that you actually do get into, to say, okay, here's the award letter that we got, here's the total cost of attendance. We've saved all this money in our 529s. We maybe are supplementing from some other source like a Roth IRA. We can also help project out what's going to be the total debt incurred if the full tuition is not met, right? And then beyond that, we can make some projections as far as on a monthly basis, what will that actually cost? And that could come in the form of student loans, right, straight to the actual student, or it could be parent plus loans where parents are taking on some of the debt as well. And we can budget and help and figure out exactly who owns the debt, what's it going to cost, and how to ultimately move forward. As far as paying during the college years, I list here how to spend down the 529. That can vary, and it can vary by family, financial situation, whether or not there's any kind of loan forgiveness in play. If you work for, as an example, a school, a university, or as Claire worked for a school district, right? You may actually have some loan forgiveness available to you. Public service loan forgiveness is the name of it. Grants and scholarships can play into that as well. Just when you spend the 529, is it year one? Is it year four? Is it something that we're delaying all the way to a different kid, right? I've got 3 little kids. I guess between Lauren and Claire, I'm the only one with a couple of girls. I might take 529 money and move it from my oldest, my son, down to my youngest, my daughter, depending on what our actual strategy is. And everybody's different with this, right? Just like every school you would potentially apply to, want to attend, everybody's different, and it's important for us to customize a plan to go along with what your plan truly is and what you're really looking to get out of the college experience. Pay as you go is really just whatever you haven't saved, and if you're not taking loans, it might actually be like that monthly budget that you're looking to take money directly out of checking savings, paycheck, and put towards school. And then just using student loans, like how do we actually structure that so that we're using it, it's an effective use of it, and we're ultimately maximizing all other programs that are available to minimize, the school debt and school cost in the end. Just another quick visual, year by year, things can vary. Gift aid, how much you're taking out of your pocket, what are you taking from the 529? What's the EFC, expected family contribution, is changing to student aid index, right? So that's going to be a change. You may see that if you're applying to school now or you're midstream, you may see that. It's essentially the same thing. They renamed it. But it's important for us to look at it again on a year by year basis, because what you get in gift aid, if you look just kind of these first couple lines, you may get more in the first 2 years, less in the final 2 years. And it's important for us to plan for that, expect that, and have strategies going into school to make sure that you're able to effectively meet those costs. Flip to after the fact, right? So paying off student loans. Loan structure matters, right? So I alluded to this a little bit earlier. Depending on how you structure the loans going in, there may be more options for you on the back end, right? So a lot of times that ends with something like a loan forgiveness, right? Like, how do you set it up to best take advantage of loan forgiveness, or how do you set it up to best, minimize the amount of interest that you're paying, and when the clock truly starts for when you're paying the loans back. Income-driven repayment plan. I have a chart. Again, it'll be maybe difficult to see over the Zoom, but a lot of good information, a lot of different options as far as how you can pay the loans back. And it's important to set that up in a way that, maybe your new graduate can afford to still live in an apartment, with friends, or maybe they're going to live at home for a couple of years. That may influence the choices that you make as far as the repayment goes. Who owns the debt? It's actually kind of amazing how little the federal government will issue in loans directly to students. So it's not that much money. It might be 25,000, it might be 30,000. There's a little bit of wiggle room depending on specific situations. But if you look at the total cost of some of these schools, BC being up over $80,000 a year, that isn't going to pay the whole way, right? So then what are the options beyond that direct student debt? It's either you go to private companies, so whether it's a bank or SoFi or companies like that actually do student loans, where parents frequently have to actually co-sign those loans. So parents still end up being on the hook, even if the student is taking the loans in many cases. Sometimes financial institutions will make the bet that, the student will be able to pay it back and they should be fine. But often they don't, and parents need to co-sign, or parents are taking the loans on, which are called Parent Plus loans, and that is in the federal program, and those two choices really do matter as it relates to the repayment plans as well as the loan forgiveness piece of it. And again, with all of this stuff, it's individualized, and it's important to just engage on this to make sure that we set things up correctly on the front end, and then we're able to deal with it much better on the back end. This is just a chart that shows many of these student loan repayment methods, whether it's a, fixed payment just over the course of 10 years, 30 years, whatever it might be, or, there are things that are based on the income of the actual student once they graduate. So depending on how much they make, that will dictate how much their actual monthly payment will be. And ultimately, what they pay over the course of the life of the loan. So I know I went through a lot of that very quickly. The one additional slide I have here just with this pie chart is the budget, the life after graduation. And so, depending on what your undergraduate degree is, will depend on what the annual salary ends up being upon graduation, right? And then we're looking at every other expense that your child has. And, it's important for us to look at this because some parents might say, you flew the nest, it's time to go, baby bird, fly on your own. Others might love to have their kids, back in the house after graduation. But it is important to know that, like all of these other living expenses, and then you pile student loan debt and a monthly student loan payment on top of that. Depending on how much that loan is, that could be make or break as far as whether or not your recent college graduate has even the ability to move out, the ability to pay those loans, the ability to live on their own, and whether or not, again, they end up coming back home and saying, hey, mom, dad, what's for dinner, every single night, which again, depending on the situation, may be a great thing, maybe something that we're not interested in doing. It's family by family. And again, all of this stuff is customizable and personalized. And, whether you're working with a college counselor or you're working with us to help you figure out that budget and figure out really what's that balance of like what school to go to, what program to focus on, and again, how to pay for it. Like it all comes together in a way when you leverage, professionals essentially to get to to a great place, you know, and kind of, as Lauren said, you know, like take joy in it, you know, like lean into that joy. It's fun. It's great. It's a wonderful thing that a student's able to go to college, and, you know, just how do we do it with kind of going into it eyes wide open and make sure that we're effective partners for you along the way. So that is it for prepared remarks. I know that was a lot of slides, big deck. We do want to open it up to questions. I'm not sure what questions have come in. Jeff, I'm hoping you might be able to help me with some of those.
We're pretty lively bunch today. So let me start with one, Tom, for you, while you've got the mic. Literally on Sunday, as we hit October 1st, the student loan moratorium has ended, and so I know that's a big question. Hey, does that impact consumer spending? That's an important consideration when we think about investing. But for the people who are actually going to start writing checks, can you give us an update on like the most recent loan forgiveness proposals, or kind of where that stands, or some insight on the SAVE repayment plan, which I think is the most recent iteration?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, as Claire has said to me a few times now, I think is that all of this is very dynamic. Things change, right, over time. What do the college look at, do they want test scores? Do they not want test scores? On the loan piece, it's the same, and it's been great, I think, for borrowers that we were able to hit pause on loan repayments through COVID, right? The Biden administration attempted to get through a big package on loan forgiveness. It did not pass, obviously, but they were able to, Jeff, to your point, get through a new repayment method, which is the SAVE, SAVE repayment method. And what that should actually do for most people is pretty dramatically cut their student loan payments, right? So it is one of the income-driven repayment methods. So there may be some steps that you need to take to be eligible for it if you're not already in an IDR method. If you are, it should be fairly easy to apply, fairly easy to convert to the new plan, and they have calculators on studentaid.gov that you can go on and actually figure out, like, here's my payment now, what would it be if I converted to this other method? I would say that every plan has positives and negatives about it, but the SAVE plan, I mean, makes sense for almost everybody who has, any outstanding loans. And again, I'm happy to go into more depth, with any individual client on that, to talk through it, to make sure that they have a really clear picture of, is this something that would benefit them? Should they do it? It's not actually fully in effect yet. It takes some time to roll out. So everyone, you can apply now, but it doesn't just flip a switch where you switch over. You can apply, see if you're eligible for it, and then ultimately when it comes time to switch, we can give you guidance on whether or not it's the right move for you.
Thanks, Tom. I think
yeah.
Go ahead, Maddie, please.
Just as someone who's still repaying their student loans, that SAVES program goes into effect July of 2024. So if you apply now, those payments will be switched over in July of next year. And they should give you a detailed summary of how your payments will change.
I know there's been a lot of hand wringing about like the $20,000 forgiveness not actually being executed on, and there's some ongoing discussion at with the current administration whether they'll revisit that. But to understand that income-driven repayment plans, essentially there's still forgiveness. It's just on the back end, right? So because I think a lot of people misunderstand, like, hey, it's an income-driven repayment plan, so the payment's smaller. Well, I still have the loan balance. So if the payment's smaller, I'm just going to keep this thing forever, right? Well, no, a lot of these programs kind of sunset out after 20 or 30 years of payment. So important. Thanks, Tom, for the update, and Maddie, for the specifics on the date. Lauren, I'm going to ask a question. My mother went to Boston College. I'm going to Boston College. My grandfather went to Boston College. How easy is it to get to Boston College? No, kidding aside. It continues to be a really difficult university to be accepted in. Can you give me a little bit of color in terms of, like, as a college counselor, how many clients do you have at any given school year? And I know obviously some of this is probably people you're engaging over the course of a number of years, but like I'm thinking about my public high school days. in a class of 200. Today, I live in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where the high school graduating class are enormous. And so I'm just thinking about how spread thin a guidance counselor could possibly be. So can you give me just a little color about like, hey, how many people you're working with and what that relationship looks like on kind of a day-to-day basis, or maybe not day-to-day, but just the frequency of communication and whatnot.
Sure. The caseload is what you're getting to, right? When I think about my role as a college counselor in schools. So I spent many years working at 4 different high schools. They were all private, and my caseload range was between 60 and 30. So at one high school, I had 60 students per graduating class. Claire's laughing, which is understandable because as a public school counselor, I'd imagine. Claire, what was your average caseload?
My caseload
For
was
graduating class.
Graduating class, not bad, about 50. My caseload was 200. But the difference is that you're responsible for all
Everything.
200 kids. And
Right.
so you're not just focusing on the college piece.
Right.
So you're working with your seniors and your juniors on it, but you still have freshmen and sophomores.
Right. It's a very different role and a different model. But when I was an in-house college counselor at private high schools, I'm saying that my range of caseload was between 60 and 30. Now, as an independent counselor, my goal is to work with about 20 kids per graduating class. And I focus my work on 2 things in the junior year. The first is to get to know a student. And I'm working really hard to build a relationship with my clients, because I want for them to feel comfortable trusting me as an adult advisor in their life when things become more impactful, right? The decisions that they're making throughout high school become more and more impactful on their college process the older they get. And my aim is to work with them enough in the junior year that by the time things are feeling pretty heated in the senior fall, we know each other really well. So in the junior year, I'm usually meeting with students once a month for about an hour. And the other goal we're working toward in junior year is to help them learn everything that I think they need to know about the college process so that they are unsurprised. That is the goal. I don't want my students or their parents to feel caught off guard by any piece of this process. And that's not to guarantee that it won't happen for some pieces of it, but I have seen that if students and parents feel like they know what to expect, they're able to stay calm and they're able to move through the process in a way that's more thoughtful when they're not sort of blinded by the panic and the sense that other kids or other families are doing things that they also should be doing. They can sort of rest easy knowing that we spent 11th grade walking through what to expect and what matters and how to make decisions in the junior year that will positively impact the eventual application. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, like I'm just thinking like what we do and the idea of instead of taking care of 600 families, we today take care of 180 families, right? So you're just getting much more intimate, much more in depth, take more time, really get to know the circumstances and affect a positive outcome. I want to stay on the planning piece, Tom. I know you mentioned this before. Like as we all think about a lot of our day-to-day work, it's about like we're working with pre-retirees or retirees, and I think it's like a really almost an annual or semi-annual ritual. Like, hey, how am I doing in relation to my retirement plan? Tom, what's your experience with respect to like people looking at the financial planning of college? Like, is that like hey, I do it twice, like once at the onset and then once right before writing checks? Like, and can you give us maybe some guidance as to how frequently we should really be looking at that? Both in the savings mode, but also in the distribution phase.
Sure. I would say the savings side annually, is a reasonable estimate to take a look at, right? The market unfortunately won't give us like 9% every single year like clockwork, right? The market's going to go up, it's going to go down, and we want to adjust our savings rate accordingly, as well as just kind of comparing it to the increases in tuition over time. So, as schools become more and more expensive, it is a moving target. And we want to make sure that we are course correcting along the way, because if we make small changes along the way, we don't end up at the end way off course. I would say in the distribution phase during the college years, it may be more frequent than that, right? Because there could be issues that come up along the way, just unexpected expenses. Where do I get this money from or that money? Should I spend, my 529 money now? what if I need to supplement it from someplace else? So we are usually more in contact during those years just to make sure that we're able to help with each decision point, just to make sure that our clients are making good, solid financial decisions, as they go through, again, this largest expense that they'll have outside of maybe their home, depending on, I guess, when you bought it. And it's just critical for us to partner closely during those years.
Thanks, Tom. Claire, it's funny, we've done a couple meetings and leading up to this just to make sure that we really were being able to tap into your experience and expertise. And I know you had one of the hacks that you mentioned was like, I think we all want to have the the admissions office give us as much financial aid as possible. But, is there a benefit to not saying, hey, yeah, I'm looking for financial aid? And can you give us a little color on maybe some of the little tricks of the trade that would perhaps put your child who's very similar to somebody else, maybe at a slight advantage to get that early acceptance letter, or the, hey, you've been welcome to the class of 2024 or whatever, or 2026 or 2028?
Yeah, there are actually a couple of different, you asked a couple of different questions, even though I don't know that you asked a couple of different questions. So on the application itself, there's a checkbox, and that says, will you be asking, do you need financial aid? Will you be applying for financial aid, depending upon how it's phrased? And most people will check it off because, yes, we'd love to have financial aid. One of the values, number one, of speaking to you guys first and doing a net price calculator is how much financial aid might you get? There are also FAFSA, FAFSA is the financial aid form that you will all be filling out, and everybody should fill that out, whether you're applying for financial aid or not. They have an estimator. So you can do the FAFSA. It used to be October 1st. Now it's opening December 1st. You can do it before the opening date and just do the estimator. See whether you will be eligible for federal financial aid. If you're not getting any from there, and you've done the net price calculator from school, and you're not getting anything other than merit, merit's an entirely different thing, but need-based would be what we're talking about here. If you're not getting anything, it is to your advantage, to your child's advantage, that you not check off the box. When you check it off, the admissions people have no idea, and nor does financial aid yet necessarily at that point, whether you need $1,000 or you need full tuition. If you need the money, please check off the box. Financial aid is not going to read anything if you don't. But if you don't need the money, yes, it is to your advantage. Another one is, we didn't talk about, and I'm not going to, but early decision versus regular decision versus all the other kinds of decisions. But early decision is a commitment where you sign off, your counselor signs off, and your child signs off. This is where I went to school. This is my first choice. The reason I'm mentioning it at this juncture is people are often concerned that they are not going to get the same financial aid for early decision that they would get for regular decision. And that is a misconception. They will get the same financial aid for early decision that they would get later. The biggest difference is you cannot compare packages. And packages are what really we are talking about. What will this school give you as opposed to what will that school give you? And so if that's important to you, then you need to wait. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. It's again, like we talk about hacks, and that's a really helpful one. I think, again, it's like, hey, top choice, but like we get back to now college costing $60,000-$70,000 a year. Maybe we need to wait and forego some of that early acceptance or first choice timing.
However, Jeff, I'm just going to interrupt first.
No, yeah, of course.
The percentage is your percentage. It is an advantage with regard to getting it. And so you can't minimize that either. So we're strategizing the financial aid, but we're also, our job, Lauren and my job, is to strategize the child getting into the schools of their choice. And early decision is a strategy if the money is workable. So you can't minimize that either.
It's good stuff. Maddie and I had a late meeting last night with a client in Monte Carlo, and the probabilities and kind of doing some measuring outcomes. So that same work happens in the spring of the year they're graduating. Look, this is awesome. A couple things, in housekeeping to wrap up our session. We're going to send this recording to our clients, right? For those of you who were able to attend, thanks for the time. We really do appreciate it. I know I've had a number of other questions that we just weren't able to get to, just in the spirit of time. We will have the contact information for Lauren and Claire in our at the end of the recording, so that there's a line in. We can't emphasize enough how important this is. We are really responsible for your financial wellness, and for many people, education can be a liberating and great experience. It can be super stressful as well. So again, thank you for spending an hour with us, or a little over that today. Just to tee up October, we'll have a market update for those of us who are interested in what's been going on the last couple months, right? Last few months. And then we'll have, the other end of the spectrum, right? As we talk about, the folks in 17, 18 years old, making planning decisions that are critically important. We're gonna have a Medicare event for those folks who are already past education and at 65 or thereafter, and navigating that complex maze that exists today. So thank you so much, Claire. Thank you, Lauren, for the time. This is awesome. Again, I learned a ton. I know that I have a great resource. Fortunately, I'm 13 years away from my older guy getting in to anywhere, but I know who I'll be calling. So everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.